What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel Hand Waving. Your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 is here again with a brand new Naruto fanfic that's going to change everything. Today's fanfic is titled, What If Naruto Won Hinata and Ino's Hearts During the Chunin Exams? Part 2. THNK's FRTHMMRs. After the initial naming of the teams, the students began milling out of the classroom to either practice a bit, bond with their new teammates, or just go home and rest for tomorrow. So that is exactly what Team 8 did. They decided to bond. As the three new genin walked out of the building, Naruto began shooting off ideas on where to settle down and talk. So you guys want to convene at Ichiraku's, or something like that? Ino smacked her fist against his arm. Ow. What was that for? Naruto grabbed his arm, and looked over at Ino. Of course you would suggest Ichiraku's. It's the only restaurant you eat at, and contrary to your belief, Naruto-kun, not everyone loves ramen like you do. Naruto pouted slightly. I'm sorry, okay. I haven't had ramen in over 2 weeks, and besides, it's the only place that serves me. Naruto muttered the last bit, and Ino just rolled her eyes, and looked over at Hinata, who still was a little flushed and was just pushing her fingertips together. Where do you want to go, Hinata-san? Ino asked politely, knowing full well she's a Hyuga and they have some form of standards. I'm W with W wherever you guys W want T to go. She stuttered out her sentence before adding on, YUC can J just C call M me H Hinata B by T the W way. Naruto rose an eyebrow, but decided not to comment on her stuttering. Well, how about my place? I could make a meal or something. Ino thought for a moment, and shrugged. I have no problems with it, do you, Hinata? Going over to a boy's house? Hinata's face reddened considerably, before stuttering, I wouldn't W want T to be a burden. Naruto waved it off. It's no burden, besides we're teammates now. After a few more paces, Naruto turned around and smiled, so my place good? He got 2 nods, albeit one extremely red. Alright then. Uzumaki household. Welcome to my home, Hinata. Naruto stated as they stood in front of his house, and opened the door and held it open for them to enter. Thanks, Naruto-kun. Ino smiled and walked in, knowing exactly where the kitchen was. Pardon the intrusion. Hinata stuttered and entered, looking around. Naruto shut the door, and watched as Hinata looked around the house with a mild curiosity. When she laid eyes on the photos, she walked up to them, and smiled, but Naruto also noticed the hints of sadness in her eyes. After looking through the photos, she realized there wasn't a single picture with his parents. In fact, she realized that there were no adults even present in the household. Where A or Y your parents and Naruto-san? Naruto stiffened, but smiled. Well, I don't have any. They died before I knew them, but I know who they are, and that's enough for me. He turned to face her. Just so you know, I don't want pity. At first it was hard, I won't deny that, but right now I'm happy with what I got, ya know. He grinned, and scratched the back of his head. So in any case, what kind of food do you like? Hinata looked down at her hands, a little guilty for asking a personal question, but still answered his question. I'll like our red bean soup. She began pressing her fingers together in her nervous tick. Naruto nodded. Well, come on into the kitchen, no need to stand out here, right? Hinata nodded sheepishly and followed Naruto through his house to his kitchen. As they walked in, Ino was already helping herself to some cherry tomatoes at the kitchen island, making herself feel at home. Hinata, timidly, took a seat at the left of Ino, and waited patiently, waiting for her treat. Now, to Ino, it was no surprise that Naruto could cook. She knew he lived alone, and when he wasn't over at their house for a meal, he was making his own. She knew for a fact he wasn't bad. If anything, he could put several women and men to shame with his cooking skills. So, Naruto started off the conversation, all the while preparing the food. I guess I'll start. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, age 12, I love ramen, and my team, I don't like how people treat others for something they can't control, and as I'm sure you all know, I want to be Hokage someday. Ino gave a small smile and introduced herself. I'm Ino Yamanaka, age 12, I love a few things. She sported a slight blush, including this team and banana pudding. I dislike how people who bully others, and I want to have a family one day. When she finished, she looked over at Hinata, and Naruto glanced over his shoulder as well. Hinata gave a little eep before looking down and began, surprising with no stutter. I'm Hinata Hyuga, age 12. I love cinnamon rolls, my new team. I dislike the caged bird seal, and one day I wish to reunite the Hyuga clan. Naruto nodded with a smile. Good to hear then. I know it was kind of cheesy, because we're probably going to do it again tomorrow, but it was just to break the ice. After a few more minutes, Naruto finished the soup and set it in front of Hinata. Eat up. Thanks F for the F food. She bowed her head slightly and began eating. Her eyes widened when she took a bite. This I is really good and Naruto-san. Naruto grinned. Thank you. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. You know you can just call me Naruto. I'm not all that for honorifics to be honest. Hi-N Naruto. Hinata managed, before feeling her face heat up. Finally Naruto couldn't take it anymore. I don't want to sound rude Hinata, but I don't think I've seen a Hyuga this shy before. Ino nodded in agreement. Hinata turned a deeper shade of red. I'm sorry. This I is all new to me. She started pressing her fingers together, and had a sad look on her face. It's why I'm not particularly liked by my C clan. Even though I'm the C clan heiress. Naruto scoffed. That's a load of bull if you ask me. Hinata's head jerked up instantly and looked at Naruto. Just because you're shy you shouldn't be disliked. Naruto began scratching his head. Then again, I'm not all that into clan politics, and even from what I've seen of the Yamanaka clan there shouldn't be any real reason to not like someone for being shy. Naruto looked to Hinata for an answer. Hinata looked down at her hands. It's because RC clan is not supposed to how emotion. We are to remain stoic. The exacto opposite of me. Be your own person Hinata. Naruto stated, looking down at the table. You have the power to be who you want to be. No one can change that. Naruto put on a thoughtful look. As a matter of fact, I remember another Hyuga. I think his name is Neji. Naruto shrugged. He's in the branch family if I remember correctly, and from what I've observed he's quite stronger than most branch and the majority of the main branch at his age. If he can do that against the so-called odds, then why can't you? Naruto looked at Hinata with a smile. I just want you to know you got me on your side. Ino nodded. He's right, you know. You got me by your side too. Us girls got to stick together, right? Tears began to well up around her pale lavender eyes, before nodding in determination. I'll try my best. She gripped her hands into fists. She was going to save her sister from her damnable fate of being sealed, and meanwhile saving herself from that fate as well. Both Ino and Naruto grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. Naruto grabbed her bowl and refilled it. He set it back down, and his face adorned a sad smile. Now that we got out of the way, I think there's something I ought to share with you all. Ino looked surprised. Naruto rarely ever put that smile on. It was only when to stop her, Shikamaru or another one his friends from getting angry at the villagers who glared at him. Though for what she still had no idea, and yet the way things were going, it looked like they would get the answer to it. Since I basically made Hinata voice her demons, I think it would only be fair if did mine as well. Naruto stated, before chuckling a bit. Laugh it up, brat. Kurama huffed, at the literal, but still a joke nonetheless. Naruto looked at both Ino and Hinata, who both had curious looks on their faces laced with traces of concern. I'm telling you all this because I'm sure you need to know this, and well, it may very well change your opinion about me. He looked at Hinata. I'm not sure how you see me, Hinata, but I'm sure you've heard, or at least been told, to stay away from me for no apparent reason. So I don't really know how you really see me, but you're my teammate and I'm trusting you with my life as your life with me. Come on Naruto-kun, it can't be that bad, can it? Ino asked, raising an eyebrow, resting her head on her hands looking at Naruto. Hinata merely waited patiently, but she was having similar sentiments. Hinata had heard the rumors of most parents telling their children to stay away from Naruto. Her father didn't place any restrictions upon her, and the council had no say in who she talked to, for the most part. This was because Naruto had helped her get away from bullies when she was younger. Hiyashi, her father said, any man that is willing to protect others, especially his own daughter, is more than welcome. Hinata had looked up to Naruto for years after that little incident. She had seen how he acted in his earlier years at the academy, and no matter how much he was criticized or beaten down, he would always stand right back up. That much didn't change, especially when suddenly he came back to school with a different attitude towards his studies. Then there was the drastic change in his fighting, and his learning curve. It was well known that Sasuke became Rookie of the Year because of his superiority in Genjutsu. Most would say she would have crush on him, considering how she's always looking at him, but in truth she just looks up to him. He's something she wishes to be, and now to see him like this concerned her. She preferred the Naruto who was smiling, and had a look of mischief. Naruto turned his head and faced Ino. Well, I guess that depends on how you all will take it. Looking back down at his countertop, he let out a sigh. I know for sure your parents, and most of the adults around here, know, but because of the Hokage's law they are not to speak of it or risk death. So keep that in mind. Once I tell you this, you will not be allowed to tell anyone else about my status. He received a collective nod from the two and he let out breath. So I'm sure you all know the story of how the Yondaime Hokage defeated the mighty Kyuubi. Bah, preposterous. Kurama huffed, and fixed his glasses on his face as he watched through Naruto's eyes. Naruto ignored him and continued, well, that wasn't necessarily true. You can't simply kill a Biju, they're pure beings of chakra with thought. They would slowly reform over the course of 3 years, but that's beside the point. The Yondaime did something else entirely, but it still cost him his life. He sealed the Kyuubi into a newborn child. He looked up at Ino and Hinata. That child's birthday was October 10th, the exact same day of the Kyuubi's attack. Ino's eyes widened, and checked her mental calendar. Isn't that your birthday? Naruto gave a small smile, and nodded, indeed it is. Hinata gasped, why you were the newborn? Naruto nodded once more, yes, inside of me I contain the mighty Kyuubi no Kitsune. My mother and father died protecting me in order to seal the Kyuubi inside of me. Naruto stood up and walked towards the door out of the kitchen. I'll be right back. Both Ino and Hinata were shell-shocked. The reason the villagers, and the few shinobi, hated Naruto was because he contained the Kyuubi. It was completely ridiculous. Ino clenched her hands into fists. Even she knew the difference between the scroll containing the kunai. Hinata didn't understand how the villagers could do such things to Naruto, given he had no say in the matter. He wasn't even the one who caused the mess in the first place, and it wasn't his fault that he happened to be born on that day. Yet for both of them they couldn't fathom how the Yondaime could bestow such a burden, on a child no less. Something was missing from what Naruto told them. After a few minutes Naruto walked back into the kitchen holding a picture frame and looking at it fondly. I can only guess the questions going through your mind right now, but I hope when I show you this picture it may clarify things more. He set the picture in front of them, and turned it to face them. Both Ino and Hinata gasped in shock. In the picture they recognized right away the Yondaime Hokage smiling at the camera. Next to him was a woman that both of them looked up to as a kunoichi. The red-hot habanero was by far one of the most powerful kunoichi out there, and was rumored to even have the famed Yondaime, aka the Yellow Flash, on his toes when the two would spar. Though what the two didn't get was why the Yondaime had his arms around her and that she was pregnant. Hold on. Ino nearly shouted, why is the red-hot habanero pregnant? Naruto chuckled, and looked at Ino, what's her real name? Hinata furrowed her brow for a moment, and then her eyes widened, Kushina. Uzumaki. Ino's eyes went widened, she's your mother. Naruto nodded with a small smile, but why is the Yondaime with her? From what I could remember he didn't have a family. Not to public knowledge, no. Naruto stated and sat back down at the table. the Yondaime, or Minato Namikaze is my father. Just take away the whiskers from my face. Ino couldn't believe she hadn't made the connection earlier. He was practically a spitting image of the Yondaime for crying out loud. Hinata was equally surprised by this fact, and what almost pale in comparison was that if the entirety village knew it was the late Yondaime's son they were basically torturing, they may very well go up to him and beg for forgiveness. Though there was one thought in their minds that begged to be answered: why didn't anyone know he was the Yondaime's son, and for that matter Kushina's son? Naruto-kun, you have to tell everyone about this. Ino shouted at Naruto, but he just shook his head. Why not? Haven't you suffered enough? Hinata lowered her head. If you see can tell me to be my own person, then I see can tell you to do this for yourself. She looked back up at Naruto with determination in her eyes. Naruto smiled, and still shook his head. It's not that I don't want to, know. Both Ino and Hinata their heads in confusion. Do you really think after everything I done, if I just go around saying I'm the Yondaime's son that they'll believe me? Naruto chuckled. If anything they'll just get angry at me for disgracing his name. But Naruto-kun. Ino started but Naruto cut her off. I appreciate the concern you guys, and I'm more than thrilled that you both still don't care about the Kyuubi either. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. I didn't know how you both would take that truly. I was kind of scared of rejection, but I had to let you guys know. Smack asterisk ow. What was that for? Naruto shouted, rubbing the sore spot on top of his head, glaring at Ino. That's for doubting us, Ino stated, shaking her hand. I mean common, you're just a jailer. That's like saying my father that was the head of T and I should be responsible for all the crimes of the people he interrogated and kept behind bars. Hinata nodded fervently. Ino's are right. But that shouldn't have anything to do with telling T the villagers who your parents are. Naruto let out a sigh. The reason I won't be telling them isn't because it's not my choice. Both Ino and Hinata wore looks of confusion, so Naruto clarified, as of right now I'm not strong enough to defend myself. According to the Hokage, I will be able to claim my inheritance once he deems that I can protect myself, or the Yondaimes will of me obtaining the rank of Chunin. After that it will be publicly announced that I am indeed their son. But why not now? Ino asked. Because of the Iowa nation. Naruto stated. They have an immense hatred of the Yondaime for devastating their forces. If they were to find out he had any offspring, they would waste time in trying to kill me off just to spite an already dead man. Ino pursed her lips. Much to her disappointment, it was a reasonable condition, and as much as she would love to see those villagers beg for forgiveness, she'd rather have Naruto safe. As much as you can get as a ninja anyway. Hinata found it to be quite reasonable, but she just didn't want Naruto suffer any more than he had to. He didn't realize how much he helped her find what little confidence she had throughout their time at the academy. Even with his change of attitude, he was stood up to others for what he believed in. Besides, Naruto started gathering the attention to him once more. I don't want pity from the villagers. I want them to come to terms with me, or respect because of me and not because I'm Yondaime's son. He looked at both of them with a smile. It's enough having my friends like you guys know, and still don't care either way. Clapping his hands together, making both of the girls jump in their chairs. Alright, now that's out of the way, we can move on to a more pleasant topic, training. Ino groaned, and Hinata nodded with a small smile. That sounds good. And Naruto. Ino was feverishly shaking her head. And no, it's not. He's a slave driver. Naruto feigned being stabbed in the heart. I'm hurt, Ino-chan. I've never done anything of the sort. Liar. Ino shouted at a chuckling Naruto. Naruto held up his hands in a disarming manner. I didn't mean full-on training either. I was just thinking a little bit of sparring to see our strengths. After all, if we're a team then we have to know our strengths and weaknesses. Ino huffed and crossed her arms. Fine, I wanted to ask for your advice on my taijutsu anyway. Naruto nodded with a smile. Ino looked over at Hinata. So, Hinata, you use your family's gentle fist taijutsu, right? Hi. Hinata nodded. Why do you ask? What, Ino-chan, is probably going to say is, just use the taijutsu portion of it when you're fighting. Naruto intervened. We both know that your style is meant to close chakra points, but it still packs a hit. So during the spar don't force chakra into our systems. Hinata nodded in understanding, but by no means hold back, okay? Since this partially training, if you hold back we won't be getting any better. It could also be a bit insulting if you do. It's the only way we'll figure out if where we stand in our own style, and that's including yours. He got another nod, but it was a little on the hesitant side. Alright, let's get going. Naruto's private training ground. Whoa! Ino exclaimed, as she looked around the clearing, and the various training gear around the field. So this is where you disappeared to all the time during the summer and the school year. Naruto chuckled. Yeep, I fell upon this place on accident, and well I took into my own hands. It's actually my own private property. I talked with Hokage Jizan and he let me buy it. By far one of my better investments. Hinata herself was looking around in appreciation of the place. It's almost as if I'm in my clan's C compound. Yet she didn't feel tense as she would be. Not surprising since she was always spied upon in the compound. The only safe havens were her room and the bathrooms. Well, I suppose that's a good thing then. Naruto chuckled, because you two are more than welcome to use this training ground as you see fit. Ino looked over at Naruto with a surprised look. Really? Are you sure? I mean, this is your private property and all. Naruto waved it off and shrugged. It's fine, but to be safe make sure no one's following you when you do decide to train here. I'd really like this to be kept off the maps for now. Hinata and Ino both nodded. Thank you. So let's get this sparring underway, shall we? After about 30 minutes both Hinata and Ino were both panting and nursing their bruises that they had received during their sparring. Naruto was nursing a few bruises himself, but he was nowhere near tired. Ino glared at Naruto with envy. How are you not tired, Naruto-kun? We fought all out in those spars. Naruto looked at Ino, and then over to Hinata who was looking to him for an answer as well. He merely shrugged. The Kyuubi has a set workout schedule for me, so I have quite the stamina reservoir. If you two want I can work out a stamina training schedule for you both. He received two very enthused nods from both the girls, and he grinned. It'll have to wait though, since I was really paying attention to your stamina more of your moves. I need to put you through a series of tests in order for it to work. Every little bit helps. Ino stated with a minor shrug. After a moment Ino held up her standard chain in her hands. Hey Naruto, I was just wondering, could you look at my chain? Naruto raised an eyebrow and walked over to Ino and plopped down next to her. What's wrong with it? Something just feels off lately. Ino stated and watched as Naruto inspected it with a serious look. How so? Naruto questioned as he moved the chain through his hands, examining for anything that could set it off. Like it's acting too quickly. Ino suggested. That's what it feels like. Naruto was silent for the next few moments, examining the chain further. During those few moments Ino stared at his face, and admired the serious expression on his face. She had seen this look multiple times before, and she respected it, besides finding it really cute from time to time. Naruto never demeaned her by any means, or any other kunoichi for that matter. If anything, he expected the exact same thing from you. So when he trained her for the last 3 years in his clan's taijutsu, he wore that look that said you would get no lenience from him. Well, there's nothing wrong with the chain, Naruto stated after a while. Ino hung her head. So it's something I'm doing wrong? No, not at all. Naruto shook his head and Ino's head snapped up in surprise. The chain is merely too light for you. Naruto reached into his bag and pulled out a blank scroll, an inkwell, and a writing brush. But I can fix that, no problem. Hinata's curiosity piqued. Why, you know Fuinjutsu and Naruto? Naruto nodded a little sheepishly. I'm just a novice sealer. I don't know why, but I find Fuinjutsu extremely interesting and it's very useful if you know how to use it. So what are you going to do my chain, Naruto-kun? Ino asked, her own curiosity piqued. Wouldn't it be easier to get heavier chain? Naruto nodded. It can be yes, but the higher the thicker the chain links. I know you're used to this chain width and length. So if I can adjust its weight through a simple weight seal, why bother? Besides, good practice for me, and it saves you money. Ino nodded in appreciation. Thanks, Naruto-kun. Chains are expensive anyway. Naruto set out to work. After a few minutes of him setting out the outline of the seal, he brought out a few reference materials to base his work off from. All the while Ino and Hinata sat side by side as they watched him make seemingly pointless strokes of the ink brush here and there on the scroll. As he continued working, Naruto stopped for a moment, and his brow scrunched in confusion. Then his eyes widened and a grin placed itself on his face, and he went on with his work placing new markings in his outline. I know Fuinjutsu is one of the most complicated routes to take, but it seems like a bunch of random kanji markings. Ino said to Hinata. It's that our reason that most ninja don't you use it. Hinata stated, and continued watching Naruto. It's amazing how much Naruto has hanged. Ino nodded. When I first met him, he was a bit of idiot, but he stood up for what he believed in and for others as well. Ino smiled remembering events back at the academy. There, Naruto stated finishing the seal on the scroll, now pull the chain in the center. Naruto muttered to himself, raising his hand into the ram seal. In a puff of smoke the complex markings on the seal were gone, and what was left was Ino's chain with an occasional black link, perfect. Naruto grinned and handed it to Ino. Here, try it out. Ino grabbed her coiled chain and let it fall to the ground and went into the link motion taijutsu stance. Well, here it goes. She started rotating her body, her chain following soon after. Her body flowed with ease, switching from leg to leg. Seemingly at random intervals she would flip at ease, but to the eye it looked delayed. That was the beauty of link motion. It played tricks on the eyes with the chain as the main distraction. It formed a spherical shape around Ino, and in such played with the eyesight of the enemy. Though it all wasn't for show either. In a sense it was a perfect defense, much like the gentle fist style. If the chains were enhanced with chakra, then it could deflect some powerful jutsu. When she finally came to a stop, she continued to move her chain arms so it could coil nicely at her feet. Ino though was sporting a frown. It still feels the same, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded. Okay, good, it didn't activate prematurely. Ino looked at Naruto in surprise. Okay Ino-chan, what I need you to do is channel chakra into the chain while using the ram seal. When you feel your chakra push back even the slightest, stop the flow. Ino nodded, and did as she was instructed. Positioning her hands into the ram seal, she let the chakra flow until she felt resistance. When she finished, she found the chain was slightly heavier, but not to over the top. It feels heavier now. How is that possible? Naruto grinned. It's an improvised version of the weight seal. I took some concepts from the resistance seal. Instead of using an estimates for the traditional weight seal, I gave it levels in which it can gradually increase or decrease depending on the situation. He got a nod from both Hinata and Ino, who were barely able to follow what he was saying. The only other thing that I did was apply a reinforcement seal so that way it won't break easily. Ino was wide-eyed, and Hinata was surprised, all that from a single seal. Ino practically shouted, "It almost makes me want to learn some." Hinata nodded in agreement. Naruto grinned. I don't mind attempting to teach you, but remember I'm still learning too. Ino shook her head. Thanks for the offer, but I know my limitations. I also appreciate the offer, but I respectfully decline. Hinata bowed her head in respect. It's alright, Fuinjutsu isn't for everyone. Naruto grinned, but at least let me show you how to make storage seals. That's almost a necessity. Hinata and Ino looked at one another and shrugged. That's fair. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Not that wasn't cool or anything, but in some ways it was very disturbing. With this statement he received a couple of giggles from the girls. Why do I get the feeling I just gave Ino-chan a new weapon against me? Naruto shivered a little at thought, but shook his head. Well, I suppose that's it, but Hinata, if you wouldn't mind, could I talk to you for a moment? Hi. Hinata replied. Ino raised an eyebrow. but shrugged and went home wanting to take a well-deserved shower. Hinata looked at Naruto who was packing his stuff away. What did why you want to talk to me about Naruto? Naruto stood up brushing off his pants, and looked over at Hinata. Nothing too major really, it's about your taijutsu style is all. Hinata stiffened, and Naruto held up his hands in a placating manner. It isn't anything bad, I promise. You're very good at it, but like it's supposed to be, it's a very rigid fighting style, right? Hinata nodded. Hi, it's based around the earth element. I thought so. Naruto nodded, and pulled out a slip of paper, and handed it out to Hinata. Here, I want you to channel chakra into this paper. Hinata's brow furrowed, but nonetheless grabbed it and did as instructed. When she did, the paper became soaked in a near instant. I'm a watery element. Naruto grinned. Yeep, and that's why it's hard for you to learn your family's gentle fist. Hinata hung her head in disappointment. Hey, now no need to be down. Hinata looked up with doubt in her eyes. Yeah, your family's style is based around the earth element, but the chakra you're putting into it isn't rigid like the earth. It flows like water. So I'll never achieve my family's approval. Hinata's eyes looked down in disappointment. Oi, Naruto shouted, startling Hinata. We're not worried about your family right now, we're worried about you. Naruto pointed at her with a stern face. So what if you can't proper? He raised his hands, and did mock quotation marks, family style. We're going to change it so that way you can use it and not get yourself killed. Hinata's eyes widened. See, change the gentle fist. Naruto nodded, but Hinata shook her head. But we can't. No one has ever changed the style. Naruto grinned. There's a first time for everything. He saw Hinata worried look and grabbed her shoulders. Hinata, your clan may not want to change the style, but you have people who want you alive. I'm very sure that your father would want you alive. Me, and Ino-chan want you alive. Hell, I can practically guarantee that most of our class wants you alive. So we have to do something to help you with that. He could still see doubt in Hinata's eyes, so he went in to seal the deal. Look at it this way, Hinata. We're not totally changing it so it doesn't look the same, we're changing the motions. That's it. Just enough so your chakra flow, and your movements have more flexibility. More defense-oriented, but you'll be amazed how much a perfect defense be the best offense. Hinata felt so scared. Could she even do something like this, and not be going against her own clan's laws? She was touched that Naruto cared, and the effort he's willing to put into helping, unlike anyone else. Her father couldn't tutor her or her own daughter because the clan's style had to be learned on your own, with an occasional tip from the clan. This was all her father could do, regardless of the fact that he was the clan leader. Yet what surprised Hinata the most was the excitement that coursed through her at the thought of finally learning something that could possibly get her back in good graces. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't make the decision alone. Hinata looked up at Naruto who was looking at her intensely. She felt her face heat up at the close proximity, and well his eyes were a pretty blue. Anyo, let me discuss it with father. Hen I'll decide Naruto. Naruto grinned. Well, at least you're thinking about it, and that's what matters. Naruto stepped back, and didn't notice that Hinata felt somewhat disappointed. Well, I'm going to head home. You're more than welcome to stay here and train, or would you like an escort for your way home? Hinata giggled a little. I'll be fine on my own. Naruto shrugged. Suit yourself. See you tomorrow, Hinata. With that, Naruto leapt out of the clearing. Hinata stood there for a few minutes, and let out a breath. She didn't understand why she was acting that way around him now. All before this she merely admired him for his strength and determination, but now, she's noticing little things about him. Hinata let out a sigh, and jumped up into the tree's head towards city proper. Maybe I should bring it up to Ino. She would know. Ninja Academy, next day. Naruto yawned as he entered the classroom, stretching his arms with Ino right behind with a bright smile on her face. So who do you think is going to be our sensei, Naruto-kun? Naruto shrugged. I don't know really. I don't really know many Jonin, to be honest. The only ones I really know are clan heads, and I doubt they'd be teaching a minor group of kids. Ino nodded. You're right about that. Then another she poked at another question. What do you think they'll have us do today? I would think today is just getting to know your team leader. Naruto suggested. I doubt they would throw us straight into a test without us being fully prepared. Naruto's right. A bored voice sounded out from behind. Naruto's and Ino's heads spun around to find Shikamaru with a bored expression on his face. Oh hey there Shikamaru, surprising to see you here this early. Ino said with a surprised look on her face. He shrugged. As troublesome as it is, it's better than being scolded by our new sensei. He opened his eyes and looked at both of them, but back to Naruto's point. I assume for a genin testing they'll treat it like a mission. So they'll let us prepare before, at least that's how it should work. Well, if Shikamaru thinks it's going to play out, then there isn't a doubt in my mind. Naruto chuckled and took a seat in his usual spot. When he looked around the classroom, it finally dawned on him that a lot of the class hadn't really made it through. Well, at least most of those fangirls didn't make it through. They wouldn't have lasted long out in the field. Naruto let out a sigh. Anyo. Ga. Naruto yelped, and jumped from his seat, latching on the ceiling with chakra. When he looked down, he found Hinata looking at him, along with everyone else in the room, with a confused expression. Chuckling sheepishly, he dropped to the floor, and rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Haha, sorry about that, was zoning out. Everyone shrugged and went back to their discussions, and Hinata stepped forward. Anyo, I talked to my father. Naruto raised his eyebrows. So what he say? Flashback. Hiyashi sat in his study looking over his clan's paperwork, ranging from finances to complaints. His face was blank as ever, as was most Hyuga, but if you listened closely you may be able to hear the slight grinding of his teeth. Once again, members of his clan had the audacity to try and push for his eldest daughter's seal treatment. He stamped them with rejected, and moved on through his paperwork. After a few moments he let out a sigh. I don't know what to do. Hiyashi thought to himself, she has the form, but it's taking far too long to learn. He let out another sigh. He didn't know how much longer he could prolong it. There was a subtle knock at the door. Hiyashi activated his eyes and found it was his eldest. Enter. Hinata slipped in through the door, and closed it and bowed. Is N now a bad tea time, father? Hiyashi almost raised an eyebrow. Her stuttering has calmed significantly from this morning. Hiyashi turned fully from his sitting position and nodded. Of course not. Have a seat. Hinata nodded, and sat across from her father. She made two hand signs. Hiyashi nodded and made the monkey hand sign, and the privacy seals were activated. After a moment Hinata looked up at her father's unwavering gaze. I am met with my team today. Hiyashi nodded. He knew today her daughter would begin her genin days so long as her team could work together. They are Naruto Uzumaki, and Ino y Yamanaka. Hiyashi's eyes narrowed. So that's why her stuttering is lessening. Even one day around that boy can be life-changing. Hiyashi cleared his throat. Sounds like a rather interesting team. Do you happen to know who your instructor is? Hinata shook her head. I assume so. Carry on. Hinata nodded. They helped me realize something today. Hiyashi now visibly rose an eyebrow. It wasn't every day someone inspired his daughter. That if I truly want to achieve my dreams, I have to be myself and not someone I'm not. Hiyashi was in slight awe. This was the first time he had ever heard his eldest speak clearly, but he kept his face in check. But if one were to look closely, you could see a faint smile. Well, it would seem that I have to thank some individuals. So with that, I have come with a request. Hinata stated, and trying to keep her nerves in check. She was trying her hardest not to stutter. She wanted to be herself, but that was one thing she wanted to change about herself. Hiyashi kept his face in check, but now he was curious to what her daughter wanted. She knows that she can't ask for help, but perhaps she's not looking for my help. Hinata took a breath and held out simple piece of paper. She channeled her chakra into it and instantly it became soaked. I have found my problem with the gentle fist. Hiyashi frowned for a moment, before dawning of realization. Your chakra element doesn't work with the gentle fist. Hinata nodded and placed the paper down on the floor. This comes to my request. She took another breath and calmly, Father, with your permission, I would like to alter the gentle fist to suit my chakra nature. Alter the gentle fist. Hinata nodded, and Hiashi let out a huff and brought a hand to his chin in thought. This was completely unheard of in the entire clan's history. He didn't doubt there would be unrest either from clan elders. The mere fact that Hinata didn't have the right chakra nature for the gentle fist was just more fuel to the fire. That was the other thing he didn't get. How did she have such a strong water element? His wife, before she passed, was a very strong woman and very talented at the gentle fist. He frowned in concentration. There was something missing and he didn't know what. He thought back to his wife's fighting days, and began analyzing what he could remember. If there was one thing he knew about his wife, was that as much as she was strong, she was equally cunning. As he looked back on it, he slowly began to see different motions within her style. She fought with grace, and without relent. All the while it was calm, warm, and determined. He was a fool to not even notice the changes. She even gained undeniable praise from the clan elders. Hiashi let a small smile grace his lips. She had altered the style for her own chakra nature, without an entire clan that claims to see everything with their eyes. Hiashi looked down at his daughter and found that her eyes were determined. Hiashi closed his eyes. Who will help you in this endeavor? You know I cannot have any direct training with you. Hinata felt hope surge through her. He didn't say no. Naruto is the one that pointed it out to me, father, and he said he would help me to the best of his abilities. This is the part she was worried about. She didn't know how her father viewed Naruto. It would seem, he's far more intelligent than I have been led to believe. Hiashi inwardly smirked at the thought. I see. What are your thoughts on young Naruto? He's strong. Hinata stated right away. He always stands back up when he falls, and he fights for what he believes in despite how others treat him. Hinata looked down at her lap, and clenched her hands. He inspired me to do better for the longest time, and now he's pushing me to make it a reality. She looked back up, directly into her father's eyes and held his gaze. I will get strong and fight for what I believe in, because that is now my ninja way. Hiashi felt a small chill work down his spine. The sheer determination in her eyes reminded him of his late wife. Strong, determined, and a hint of mischief. Hiashi closed his eyes for a moment, and let out a long breath. He knew he was taking a huge gamble with this, but if anyone could deceive an entire clan it would be Naruto, and his daughter. After all, she is his wife's daughter. While with his eyes closed a small smile graced his lips. Very well, I will allow this, but on one condition, and it is non-negotiable. He opened his eyes and stared sternly at his daughter. This agreement is to remain between us, Naruto-san, and your team. That is all. Hinata nodded, her heart soaring. Understood. Good. Hiashi looked back at his pile of paperwork with a glare. Now if you'll excuse me, I have this to work on. He turned around and picked back up his resting pen, releasing the seals. Why yes, father. I'll be bring you some tea. Hiashi eyed his daughter, but when he looked he saw a small smile and received a mischievous wink and left to do her task. I do believe Naruto may have just saved Hyuga clan. Hiashi smiled inwardly, and immediately scowled at yet another sealing request. With an angry jab, the denied stamp claimed another piece of paper. Flashback end. After Hinata explained what happened, Naruto was genuinely surprised. To be honest, I wasn't sure if your father would allow that, but hey, don't have to worry about that now. Hinata nodded in agreement. So when do we start? Naruto rubbed the back of his head for a moment. Well, it will be after our true genin exam, and after the physical examination I give you an Ino-chan. Hinata nodded, and looked around and whispered in his ear, I have to keep a stutter, I'm still under watch a little. Naruto nodded with a smile, of course it's alright. Why wouldn't it be? Hinata smiled, thank you. With that Ino walked over with a smile, so I take it things went well. Hinata nodded, and Naruto smiled, of course it would. Even if we didn't get the answer we wanted we'd still make it work, but this just makes it all the more easier. He grinned mischievously that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. At that moment Iruka-sensei walked in. All right everyone, in a few moments your new Jonin senseis will walk in and take you under their wings. He looked around the classroom seeing all the promising students that would no doubt change the world as he knew it. I want to take this moment to thank all of you for a fantastic 3 years. I've watched you all grow into already exceptional shinobi and kunoichi. Now the time has come for you to make a path with all that you've learned, and everything that you will learn. There was silence in the room. With that everyone, I wish good luck, and be sure to keep in touch with your sensei, yeah. After all, I do care about all of you. Everyone smiled and gave subconscious nods in agreement, so without another moment of your time I'll take my leave. He bowed and walked out the door. It wasn't long till a few Jonin came in and collected their fresh genin, but oddly enough Team 7's didn't show up, and yet Team 8's and Team 10's arrived together. Team 8. You're with me. The woman spoke and walked out of the room. Team 10, I'll meet you at training ground 10. The man smiled and disappeared in a puff of smoke. With that the two teams took their leave. Team 8 met with their instructor outside in the hall, while Team 10 went and continued on their way out of the building. After a moment the three genin were looking expectantly at the new Jonin sensei. She had wild black hair that went to her mid-back. The only thing preventing her bangs from getting in her eyes was her Konoha headband. For attire she wore a red right-sleeved undershirt underneath a standard mesh shirt. Over that she was thoroughly wrapped in white cloth with a thorn vine on it. Her legs were mostly exposed except her upper thighs, which were wrapped in bandage wrappings much like Ino. On her feet she wore standard black shinobi sandals. Though the most prominent feature of all was her ruby red eyes that seemed to pierce into you. Well, now that I know who you three are, I'll meet you all at Dan's Dango in 5 minutes. With that she put her hands together and vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving three very confused genin. What was that about? Naruto murmured, and yet there was something nagging at the back of his mind, as if he was missing something. Oi, brat, you're under genjutsu. Kurama spoke through into his mind. You sure? Naruto asked. Yes, I'm sure. Look at your friends. You haven't moved an inch. Sure enough they hadn't, and both Ino and Hinata had a dull look on their faces. I would know better than anyone what being under a genjutsu is like. So brat, you remember what to do, right? Are you sure that's a good idea? Naruto asked, slightly worried. Last time I did something like that it disturbed everything within a 2-mile radius. If you want to fail, fine by me. Kurama shrugged within his mind, though I get the feeling that's not something you would do. Naruto let out a sigh, fine. Brining up a single hand for half a ram sign, and whispered, release. Now what happened is as follows. He gathered a small amount of chakra in a point in his fingertips, and released it for a small area of affect. Where small actually equals a normal genin amount of chakra, and a 2-mile radius. It was enough to knock Hinata and Ino from the genjutsu, leaving blinking in confusion, and leaving their Jonin sensei, who was still standing where she was, shocked beyond belief. Naruto hung his head. I knew I shouldn't have done that. Wait, hold on. Ino looked around confused. I could have sworn we were at least in the middle of town. Hinata was looking around confused as well until it dawned on her, we were under G genjutsu. The Jonin regained her composure and nodded, indeed, and you can thank your teammate for getting you out of it. She eyed Naruto for a moment before motioning them to follow. Well, come, we'll talk more at Dan's Dango. She began walking with the rest of Team 8 following behind. Dan's Dango shop. After a short 10-minute walk they arrived at the well-known dango shop in Konoha. After sitting down each ordered a plate of dango, and once they received their order a silence fell over the table. Well, it's time that I introduce myself. The female Jonin spoke up, gathering the attention of the genin. My name is Kurenai Yuhi, I am genjutsu specialist, I like evening outings with my friends and comrades, and my dream is to ensure you become strong and capable ninja. She gestured to them, now introduce yourselves. The three looked at each other, chuckled lightly, causing Kurenai to raise an eyebrow. Ino, still with a smile on her face, introduced herself. I'm Ino Yamanaka. I mostly use my family's jutsu, but have been focusing on taijutsu for a few years, and my dream is to have a family. When she finished, she looked over at Hinata and Naruto. Hinata smiled, before looking down and began, with a small stutter, I'm Hinata Hyuga. I primarily focus my family's T taijutsu, but recently have a new focus. My dream, one day, is to reunite the Hyuga C clan. Kurenai's eyes widened slightly, but remained slant and gestured to Naruto to finish. Naruto grinned, and held his arms up, his hands behind his head. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and focus on my family's taijutsu, ninjutsu, and fuinjutsu, and of course my dream is to someday to be Hokage. Kurenai had a slight furrow on her brow. Family jutsu? I thought he was an orphan. Kurenai quickly hid frown and smiled at her genin team. Those are all excellent dreams, and I hope that I can guide you all there. She looked out of the stand, and looked up at the sun. With a small smirk she looked back at her team, so I will give you both an option. You can take my genin test today right now or you can try tomorrow. Just be warned, it would be recommended that you don't eat, it usually doesn't end well. Now to most genin, they would jump at the opportunity, to test early and be done with it. That was what Kurenai was testing to see. Being too eager to jump into a situation can mean certain death. Kurenai waited patiently for an answer. She had heard of Naruto's attitude when he was younger, and thought maybe some would bleed through, same for the young Yamanaka. Though to her surprise it wasn't meant to be. The three genin looked at each other and gave a small smile to one another. They looked at Kurenai and answered in unison, no thank you. Kurenai was both shocked and little disturbed. It's like they knew I was going to ask it. She cleared her throat. Well, if that's the case, I'll see you at training ground 8 at 9 o'clock sharp. Remember, I suggest not to eat breakfast. She winked at them and made her leave via shunshin. Ino rolled her eyes. Everyone knows you have to eat breakfast, otherwise you'll have no energy to perform. Naruto gave her a deadpan look. Says the girl who was on a diet for 2 years. Hinata chuckled as Ino pouted with an embarrassed blush on her face. Naruto stretched his arms, letting out a relaxed breath. So what are your girls' plan for today? Ino shrugged and looked over at Hinata, who actually had an answer. IW would actually like to work on that project. Hinata looked at Naruto knowingly and he smiled, leaving Ino confused. Naruto stood up, gesturing them to follow. Well, we can discuss that somewhere else, training grounds or homestead. Homestead, Hinata stated, and looked over at Ino, Shiken no en Naruto. Well, back to my place. Naruto walked out of the building with a smiling Hinata and even more confused Ino. Uzumaki residence. Instead of the kitchen this time around, they were in Naruto's living for a more comfortable environment. Once they were all situated, Naruto closed his eyes for a few moments, and brought up his hands into the monkey sign. As a testament to his growing fuinjutsu skills, Naruto placed silencing seals all over his house. After all, walls did have ears. Naruto reopened his eyes and smiled sheepishly at the two of them. Sorry, silencing all I got. They can still see the chakra. I'm still a novice, but I'm improving steadily. Thank you, Naruto. Hinata smiled, and now Ino had just about enough. Okay, what's going on? Ino shouted. I don't know what I'm allowed to know, and now Hinata has lost her stutter. Help me. Naruto chuckled. We're redeveloping the gentle fist technique to suit Hinata's chakra affinity. As for her stutter, well, I'm equally surprised, but hey, good for her. He smiled and gave Hinata a thumbs up. Ino was actually shocked. You're redeveloping the gentle fist. I'm surprised you're even allowed to do that. Hinata shook her head. Well, in a sense it's not, it has to remain a secret. Only my father and my team are allowed to know. Ino smiled and nodded. Hinata looked over at Naruto. So where should we start, Naruto? Naruto took a thinking pose for a few moments before a grin came to his face. Alright, here's where we'll start. Next day. Training ground 8 morning. Coming over the rise were two blondes who both content smiles on their faces, this from being they had a rather decent breakfast. Coming in from the side was young Hinata, who also had a content smile on her face from an equally decent breakfast. They were at least 15 minutes early, and so the early morning mist still hovered over the ground. If one looked around, it looked slightly mysterious and foreboding. They approached the center of the training field, and Kurama stirred within Naruto's mind, it's another genjutsu. I'll let the brat figure this one out. I can't help him all the time. 15 minutes rolled around, and a figure walked out of the forest who then revealed to be Kurenai. Good, you're on time. That's one thing shinobi need to be, and that's to be at the right place in the right time. She gazed at their faces, and saw that they awaited for further instruction, so the object of this exam is to find me, and at least land one hit on me. If you can do that, then you'll pass. Then she smirked. You only have 3 hours to do this, come at me with the intent to kill, and for extra incentive, the first 2 that find me are guaranteed to pass while the third one gets sent back to the academy. With that, she faded away from where she was standing, as if she was never there. After a few moments, Naruto sighed. It's obvious that was a jab to get us to split apart. Hinata nodded, and Ino huffed. That's just plain mean. Well, let's get going, Naruto stated and jumped off into the trees with Ino and Hinata following right behind. After getting into the trees, Naruto, Ino and Hinata talked in hushed tones on the exact boundaries of the training grounds. They figured their sensei wouldn't go full out against them merely for the sake that they were genin, and she was a full-blown jonin. So with that, they shot forward in order to find their sensei. While launching forward, Naruto had another objective in mind. Kurama was silent. Which meant that he was in a sense testing Naruto on how he's progressed from when he made his pact. So he wanted to see if his theory was correct. Racing straight ahead, Naruto began to realize that something wasn't adding up here after the short while. One thing he knew about Training Ground 8 was that it was separated from the other fields by a stream of water. Yet they had been fast traveling in the trees for at least 10 minutes and still had yet to run into the stream. Then there was the mist that surrounded them. Yeah, it was normal for mist to cover the grounds here, but it shouldn't be this thick and stay this long without a decent rainfall. It hasn't rained for a good week, and so due to the circulation of water, this mist shouldn't necessarily be here. Anyo. Hinata began looking around, her Byakugan active. Something isn't right. I agree. Ino looked around, eyeing some of the plant life. There's too much similarity in the plant life here. So you guys caught on too, huh? Naruto asked and looked back at them and came to a stop on the branch with others right behind him. I should have known we were under one from the start considering what she did yesterday. Ino's eyes widened. It's another genjutsu. Naruto nodded. Yesterday when I heard her name, I was curious because it sounded familiar, and so after doing some research I found out that our sensei is the genjutsu mistress of Konoha. Neither of them seemed surprised, so with that being said, I'm going to try and break this one. Hinata's brow furrowed. But I can't break this one with my Byakugan, it's too powerful. Naruto waved his finger. Well, that just means I got to flood the area now, don't I? They both looked at him confused, and he chuckled. Holding his hand up once more in the half-ram sign, he gathered chakra into his fingertips and released a 2-mile-wide chakra pulse flooding the foreign chakra from their system. Instantly the mist disappeared from around them, the sun was higher up in the air, and standing in front of them was Kurenai with a neutral expression on her face. That was a rank B genjutsu, and a high one at that. Most Chunin can't escape from that unless they have a Hyuga or adept at genjutsu themselves. Kurenai thought to herself. She knew Naruto was the Kyuubi's container, but this release he does is ridiculous. Kurenai lowered herself into a fighting stance. Well, now that you got out of that, you have 30 minutes left. She charged at them kunai in hand, and was intercepted by Naruto, who had his own kunai in hand. Naruto stood his ground, and tried to sweep Kurenai's feet, but she jumped back gracefully. In another instant a chain wrapped around her arm, and Kurenai had a look of surprise on her face as she was pulled in by Ino, who was spinning and pulling on the chain. As Kurenai got in close, Ino stopped rotating and tried to hit Kurenai with a jab, but due to released tension on the chain, Kurenai disengaged and avoided it. Grabbing the other end of the chain, Ino launched it back out, with the sharp end aiming for her legs. Kurenai missed it narrowly and landed on the ground only to find another chain wrapped around the entirety of her body. She looked over to a smiling Naruto, and then she heard the sound of running feet. Young Hinata's voice sounded out, "You're within my divination." Her fingers glowed blue and began to surge forward in rapid bursts. She ended up ending with only 16 palms landing, but she believed it would be sufficient. Though to her dismay Kurenai disappeared with only a log wrapped in the chains, a substitution. Kurenai was currently at the boundary of the clearing in the field. Their teamwork is pretty spot for only becoming a team yesterday. It's as if they've been a team since they were in the academy. I expected Ino and Naruto to be close, but Hinata is also working very well together with them. Interesting. A smile worked her way onto her face and looked up at the sky. Only 10 minutes left. What are you going to do now? Currently on the field, the three genin were conversing on what they were going to do next, while in truth the three were actually in the trees looking at where Kurenai was hiding. Looking at the other, Naruto whispered, "We got one shot at this." Getting a collective nod, they circled behind Kurenai and put their plan in motion. Naruto made 3 clones, and they charged Kurenai from 3 different directions. Kurenai looked surprised but jumped up to avoid the 3 Narutos running at her. Using 2 chains, the real Naruto from behind the real tree bound Kurenai to the tree, while both Ino and Hinata launched out of the trees and connected a solid jab to her waist. Just in time too, because just after that jab connected, a bell rang in the clearing. Kurenai smiled as she felt the chains release from behind her. Well, that was certainly well done. The 3 genin smiled at the praise. So with that being said, Ino and Hinata, congratulations on passing, since you two landed the hit as was the mission requirement. There was silence amongst the group before Ino spoke. Well, if Naruto-kun isn't going to pass, then neither do I. Hinata nodded in agreement. We're supposed to be a team, aren't we? I'm not going to leave him behind just for my betterment. Ino glared at Kurenai, and stood at Naruto's side. Hinata followed suit. He's the 1W who took the hit B by distracting the E enemy. He followed the mission perfectly. Naruto looked at both of them and smiled and leveled his gaze at Kurenai. Anything for my teammates, and my precious people. Kurenai adopted a scowl on her face, and crossed her arms. A pure red aura surrounded her. Is that so? Her voice echoed and her eyes opened, revealing 2 piercing, glowing, red eyes that contained no pupil, but yet the 3 stood strong, not backing down. You all, her voice heightened, and then it all disappeared, leaving Kurenai with a bright smile on her face. Pass. The 3 genin blinked at the sudden change in attitude, but Kurenai spoke back up to answer their questions. You followed your mission orders to the T, even knowing that one of you would be forced to fail. Then you stood by your teammate, willing to take the fall with him. No teammate is left behind. There is one saying that I will give Kakashi credit for. Those who abandon their mission are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. Kurenai eyed her team for a moment, and smiled. You all did very well today, so you're free for the rest of the day. We start active duty missions, and team training tomorrow. Dismissed. With that, Kurenai left in a puff of smoke, leaving 3 exhausted genin. The 3 were silent for a moment before Naruto spoke. I can't help but feel like I forgot something. In the distance, a female yell sounded. Naruto, oh 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 oh. He snapped his fingers. That's right. I forgot about the seal tags. Ino and Hinata brought their palms to their faces, and then Ino spoke. What kind of seal tags? Oh, it was meant to merely distract her in case she broke free again. They were. A puff smoke appeared behind him and a now orange and blue seething Kurenai with her solid red eyes. Paint. Tags. He turned around and met her gaze and whimpered, "Save me." Hokage office. Sarutobi was enjoying a nice long drag from his pipe, and let out a plume of smoke. I wonder how Naruto-kun did on his team test. He let out a sigh as he glared at the paperwork on his desk, wishing to vanish as quickly as his tobacco supply. He picked up his pen and started to work on his paperwork once more when ear-splitting yell ripped through the air surrounding Konoha, "Help me." Sarutobi nearly jumped out of his chair at the sound, much to the amusement of the Anbu in the room. What the devil? Sarutobi looked out the window to find young Naruto jumping across the rooftops with a frantic look upon his face, and right behind him was orange and blue woman who he recognized as Kurenai. His eyes widened seeing the anger on the woman's face. He knew there was no one alive who could save Naruto now. He moved his hand to the side of the window watching as Naruto started running to his window with eyes filled with hope. Then Naruto stopped moving, and fear went into his eyes. He was turned around face a snarling Kurenai who was still seething. Naruto turned his head to look at Sarutobi and mouthed, "Help me." Sarutobi looked at him glumly, and promptly closed the blinds and stated, "Let us bow our heads in memory of a fallen comrade." Like that every Anbu bowed their head in mourning as another ear-splitting yell ripped through the air. Devil in the Mirror. Uzumaki Training Ground, 1 week later. Loosen up Hinata. Hi. The sound of a chain clanging in the clearing is all that could be heard besides the occasional dull thud of metal hitting flesh. Here we found two young kunoichi sparring while one was changing what she knew, the other was improving what she knew. As for the young man that was watching the two spar, throughout the week he was surprised at their progress. He had given them their workout regime, and they took to it like a fish out of water. Though currently they weren't at the level where Naruto was going to give them a full body resistance seal. Not to mention at how embarrassing it would be. It had to be placed on the back and just under the chest, and that was not something he was keen to do. Sure, he liked Ino a lot, but he didn't think they were all that close to do something like that. Then there was Hinata and her father that would probably murder him if he found out. First they just had to build up the stamina, and then work on their strength. Though he did have an idea what Ino could pull off, that's if he read the biographies on the Sannin correctly, that is. As they continued, Naruto made notes on what he would have to correct for the both of them. "Okay girls, take 15. Naruto called out, and the girls did exactly that. Ino went and sat up against the closest tree to her, and Hinata followed suit breathing heavily. They certainly were pushing themselves, and not holding back any either. Naruto almost felt a bit guilty having them do this training after their training with Kurenai sensei, but part of being a ninja isn't to rely on another to specifically train you. After all, it wasn't Kurama who wanted Naruto to learn it for himself. Not only to continue his father's legacy, but to also one day go see his family's home in Uzu country. It's rumored that only a Uzumaki can go there. Hey brat, call it a day. Tell them tomorrow is a rest day, and after they leave I want to talk to you. In here. Kurama spoke within his mind, and Naruto gave a mental nod. Naruto walked up to them and clapped his hands to gather their attention, so I think we're going to call it a day today, and tomorrow is going to be a day for our bodies to relax. Why the rest day? Ino looked up confused. Not that I'm complaining. Naruto chuckled. Well, considering that your bodies don't have a healing factor like mine due to being a Jinchuriki, your body needs a day to recuperate and relax, otherwise you'll be doing more harm than good. Hinata nodded. Father was going to have me ask you for that anyway. Naruto grinned sheepishly. He was quite worried you hadn't taken that into account. Naruto clutched his chest in mock hurt. I would never miss such a crucial detail. Hinata and Ino gave him a deadpan look and said in unison, yes you would. Naruto's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. I really wish you'd two stop doing that. No. Naruto's eyebrow twitched once more, and let out a sigh hanging his head. Let's just call it a day already. I'll meet you at the training grounds tomorrow for another fun-filled day of D ranks. The two groaned and nodded nonetheless. So to wrap the evening training, Naruto gave them the pointers, and they carried on their way. Naruto waited for another moment before getting into his traditional meditative position, and felt the pull from within. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto's eyes blinked open and examined his surroundings. Now where is he? Naruto's mindscape hadn't changed very much from when it first changed when he made the pact with Kurama. Aside from the wide training field that Kurama could change at will to match whatever he wanted to teach Naruto. Naruto walked over to the Japanese-style housing, walked in and took of his shoes. He then proceeded to walk around the house in pursuit of Kurama. I'm in the meditation room, brat. Kurama's voice echoed throughout the house, and Naruto proceeded to the location of his voice. When Naruto entered the said room, he found Kurama in his usual human attire, black dress slacks, bright orange dress shirt, and his square wire-framed glasses. Of course his orange unruly spiky hair was uncontrollable as well. He was sitting down across from him at a low table looking at him intently. So what's so important, that you cut my my team training early? Naruto asked as he sat across from Kurama. Kurama smirked a little at his slip-up, but went back to all seriousness. It has come to my knowledge that your body is ready for beast transformation. Naruto rose a visible eyebrow. Really? Wouldn't that be frowned upon though? Then what is the point of making you a Jinchuriki? You're supposed to use my chakra and abilities to give you advantages over your enemies. Kurama explained. He hovered his hand over the table, and 3 images appeared. One image showed Naruto shrouded in a see-through red cloak that had 9 visible tails, and 2 points as ears with visibly different eyes. The next image showed him encased in yellow and chakra flowing around him like flames with minor markings all around him. Then the last image showed him in a full-on cloak of the same color and markings, but the eyes were visibly different as well, but it seemed hazy. These are my tailed beast variations. As you can see, there are 3 levels, and as you grow older and stronger you'll be able to access them. For now the first level is what we can begin working on. Kurama stated, finishing his small lecture. He looked across at Naruto, who looked at the images with curiosity. So what are the side effects? Naruto asked, not removing his gaze from the 3 forms. Kurama grinned. Very wise for you to ask. Kurama then began to explain. If you were to attempt this without our pact, then you would be blinded by enormous amounts of rage, bloodlust, and a need for destruction. Naruto looked up, obviously disturbed by this information. We do not have to worry about this since we made our pact. As for now, we will build up your tolerance to my chakra in the first level. Once you can handle my chakra with 9 tails, you will not have to worry about my chakra hindering you in the other forms. Well, that's a relief, I suppose. Naruto muttered. Even with your healing factor, this is going to hurt like nothing else, isn't it? All he got in response was a wicked grin from Kurama. Griat. Naruto groaned. Team 8 training grounds. Next morning. It was another rather peaceful morning in Konoha as Ino and Hinata both waited for Naruto to arrive before their sensei. Ino had tried to get Naruto up earlier, but he never answered the door, and she learned the hard way that there were days that Naruto was not a morning person. Ino was silently staring at the ground, playing with her ponytail, while Hinata was looking around for anything particular. Was Naruto okay? It's unusual for him to be so late. Ino nodded absently. He should be fine. There are just some mornings he isn't the most sociable. Nodding in understanding, Hinata continued looking around. How long have you known Naruto? Ino looked over at Hinata with a surprised look on her face. What brought that up? You seem very comfortable around him, but around others you're guarded. Just an observation. Hinata shrugged and looked over at Ino. Ino looked down at the ground with a small smile. I've known him since the beginning of the academy, and maybe a little before that. I remember when Naruto first visited us, it was almost kind of sad how he ate the meal in front of him. He completely devoured it like it was going to be taken from him otherwise. Ino looked up at the sky. Now that I know why he thought that way, I can't really say I blame him for it. After that day though, we spent a lot of time together, and that included the Nara, Yamanaka, and Akamichi clan meetings where he met Shikamaru and Choji. From that point on, he put himself so far into my life that I don't know what it would have been like without him. Hinata, in short, was quite surprised. She hadn't expected Ino to open up that much about it. She was just curious about how long, but the way she talked about him, it seemed that she would be truly lost. If she were honest with herself, she felt a little jealous about that. Naruto had done so much for her ever since they joined as a team. Even when not on the team, he was the definition of perseverance and hard work. Hinata smiled. He seems to change everyone around him, doesn't he? Ino giggled and wore the same smile. I know he did with me. A silence fell upon the two kunoichi, as they continued waiting for their teammate. As the minutes dragged on, they finally saw a head of bright blonde hair, but with a completely tired face along with it. He looked up and saw his two teammates and gave them a small smile and wave and stood next to them. Sorry about being late this morning, the fox has me working on something new. Naruto let out a sigh and hung his head, it hurts like nothing else too. Ino smiled and patted the top his hair comically, this is all you're getting for pity. Nato's head shot up with a look of disbelief, that's all I get. A bloody head pat. Hinata giggled, along with Ino, before she spoke, consider a little compensation for driving us into the ground. This continued on for a while with Naruto being on the receiving end. So after 15 minutes Kurenai arrived to find two chipper kunoichi, and a blonde shinobi hanging his head, his eye twitching in irritation. If she still wasn't a little miffed at the blonde's prank, earlier in the week she may have felt sorry for him. Alright Team 8, she addressed them, catching their attention, I already got our D rank mission for today and when we're through we'll work chakra pool increase exercises afterwards. What mission did we get? Naruto asked, hoping it wasn't something too bad. His muscles were really sore from Kurama's chakra enhancements. Kurenai smiled, finding Tora the cat. Hokage Tower, midday. Now Hiruzen has seen many things in his lifetime. From the horrors of a battlefield to the sanctuary, research, fields he accompanied with Jiraiya in his younger years. Though this was probably one of the more humoring sights he has ever seen in his life. Kurenai stood behind her genin with an amused smile, while both kunoichi were struggling to hold in their giggles with young Naruto standing between them, his clothes ripped, stained, and basically ruined. That wasn't all, oh no, all over his body he was covered in scratches, bruises, and scrapes. To finish it all off he was glaring at the said perpetrator, demon incarnate aka, Tora the cat. Who was currently being smothered by the daimyo's wife. Yes. Suffer you bloody damn fake of a cat. Choke on my vengeance. Naruto chuckled evilly in his mind, causing Kurama to shake his head in embarrassment. Behold my mighty container. Kurama thought, and let out a sigh. Hiruzen chuckled lightly, well done Team 8, another D-rank mission completed successfully. You may retrieve your pay in the usual manner. You are dismissed for today. As the team exited the building, they began their trek to the team's training ground for the day. Hiruzen leaned back into his chair and let out a long sigh. As amusing as that had been for him, he was still tired. He had served as Hokage for far too long, but there wasn't anyone who could take his place, willingly that is. As he stared out the window while his shadow clone was working diligently on a new pile of paperwork that seemed to have manifested by itself, a knock came upon his door. He dispelled his clone, and turned to face the door, come in. When the door opened his face took a more serious look. The man who entered was none other than Hiruzen's old teammate, and was known as the Warhawk. Danzo, to what do I owe the visit? Danzo stood with his ever-present stoic face that could give many Hyugas a run for their money, it is about the Kyuubi container. Hiruzen closed his eyes, and let out a sigh, we have been over this many times before Danzo. I am indeed aware. Danzo replied, obviously irritated, but this is another matter entirely regarding the boy. Hiruzen eyed his former teammate warily, you have my attention. Yesterday there was an influx of the Kyuubi's chakra that extended for quite some time. I am curious if the boy's seal is secure. Danzo stated, even though he knew full well what the boy was doing, he wanted to know if Hiruzen knew more. Hiruzen closed his eyes, I am very well aware of that. I assure you it was perfectly fine, and I have taken precautions to ensure that panic does not ensue. As for Naruto-kun's seal, it is perfectly fine, the seal holds strong. I see. Danzo pondered for a moment, if he has begun to dabble into the Kyuubi's power he needs to be kept under watch. I would like to volunteer my services. Hiruzen reopened his eyes and glared at Danzo, I thank you for offering, but you need not worry, I have made arrangements. Danzo gripped his cane, almost making it creak. Very well, I will take my leave. He turned and proceeded to leave before Hiruzen spoke once more. Danzo, I sincerely hope you will leave well enough alone. I may be soft in your eyes, but I am by no means incapable of stopping you. In that instant the room was flooded with thick killing intent. The Anbu in the room immediately tensed. This was more than they really felt coming from the Hokage, but it wasn't just the Hokage, it was coming from Danzo as well. Most people would have fainted from the sheer amount, but to all in that room it was merely a warning dose. We shall see Hiruzen. Danzo stated and left the room without another word. Once Danzo had left, all tension in the room dissipated as if it was never there to begin with. Hiruzen continued to glare at the door until he finally closed his eyes, and leaned back into his chair. He turned to look out the window to see yet the peaceful-looking Konoha. He let out a tired sigh. I am far too old for this. He turned back to the desk, gazed back at the scroll that was open. I hope for all our sakes, Naruto-kun, you know what you're doing. Dear Hokage Gigi, I'm pretty sure you were told of the recent Kyuubi chakra flare. I promise you that everything is fine. Kurama has me working on beast transformations. Stage 1 is the only one I can do at this time, and it's not even complete. I can only hold one tail's worth of power with only slight drawbacks. After that my body will begin to deteriorate, but Kurama is acting as a mediator to prevent that. Now I'm sure you're worried, but no need to worry about me, Gramps. I'll be extra sure to take this slow considering all that is at risk. All I ask is for a bit of faith. I've already put up a few seals around my training ground to prevent the chakra flares from occurring anymore, so you won't have to bother with that type of paperwork. If you have any questions for me or Kurama, don't hesitate to ask Gramps. The next Hokage. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. Naruto's private training grounds, evening, 2 months later. Gah! Naruto cried out as his fifth tail grew out from the cloak. It had been 2 months since Naruto started training in beast transformation, and within 2 weeks of doing so, he was cornered by a concerned Ino, Hinata, and surprisingly Kurenai. Naruto knew Kurenai knew of his burden, but didn't expect her to be fully into helping him. That was proved wrong when she cornered him and forced him to have a conversation with her. As for their concern, Naruto had been showing up to their practices and missions tired, sore, and more than a bit agitated. So after prodding him, he finally confessed to what he was doing. So that led to all three of them being in his private training ground while he practiced with his beast transformation. To say the least, it really pained them to watch it, but they said they would be there for him if he passed out or needed healing. Though that wasn't the only thing they did in the training grounds. They had to make use of the time given, and so Kurenai would do her best to train the two worried young kunoichi. She had tried to teach Hinata genjutsu, but her Byakugan cancelled it before it could even form. Though this didn't stop Ino from picking up the art. Hinata on the other hand picked up some med ninjutsu, but due to clan laws she couldn't fully devote to the art even if her chakra nature was suited to the task. Though Kurenai did imply that they didn't necessarily have to know. Hinata then decided to, secretly, become the team's main med nin and fully devoted to the field. As Ino picked up genjutsu, she continuously diligently worked with her father in her own clan's jutsu. She even found out her own elemental affinity being water, and a minor lightning. That had been tremendously helpful into fixing her taijutsu to fit some elemental components into it. Of course Hinata didn't slack either, she had her new taijutsu version of the Jiyuken down to a science. All that was left was performing it against more formidable opponents. She refused to test it on the ones that created it sorely for the fact they knew how to pick it apart. She needed to train against others who didn't know it all, but also knew a little about the Kyuuken. With that set aside, she also picked up single-handed jutsus, such as the water style, water bullet, and the med art, chakra scalpel. All in all, she made her new style even more deadly. As the minutes dragged on, Kurama watched intently while his container held his chakra. Even with the healing factor gained by having me inside him, he sure is developing this rather quickly. Gah! Naruto cried out again, and fell to one knee panting. Kurama's eyes narrowed. withdraw the fifth tail. Naruto complied and allowed the fifth tail to dissipate. Shortly after, his breathing leveled but was still labored. I guess I wasn't far enough into the fourth tail as I thought I was. Kurama shook his head. No, you are. Let's just say that the fifth tail is a milestone for us to get past. It may be because you're a bit too young to go further. After all, I didn't expect it to go this well. Well, it's something, I guess. Naruto mentally shrugged. What's the plan, Kurama? Call it a day. You deserve it. We won't pick up this till later. As for now, you will not go past four tails. Are we clear? Kurama stated firmly, and he received a mental nod from Naruto. Good, now get going, brat. Your blonde vixen is worried about you. Kurama grinned mischievously. Naruto's beast cloak faded from around him, but was blushing intently. She's not my vixen, damn fox. She's my friend and teammate. Well, maybe she could. No. Bad thoughts. Kurama was having laughing fit inside his mind while Naruto continued to mutter, stupid pervert foxes. He walked over to the three kunoichi and gave them a tired smile. Looks like my body isn't developed enough for the fifth tail, so this training is put on hold for now. Naruto stated, and he got three relieved looks, and Naruto fixed his eyes to the ground. Sorry about this, I'm sure this isn't something you want to see. Kurenai rested a hand on his shoulder, and smiled at him as he looked up. There is nothing to worry about, Naruto-san. I am just relieved you won't be hurting yourself with this training for a while. Naruto smiled, and rubbed the back his head sheepishly. Thanks, Kurenai-sensei. Sorry for worrying you all with this. Kurenai smiled and looked at her students. Well, I suppose I could treat everyone. How's about a trip to Ichiraku's? Naruto instantly had a smile on his face. Alright. Ino and Hinata felt relieved that Naruto's transformation training had come to an end. They could obviously see that it was painful to enter to the state, let alone maintain for long periods of time in combat. Though there was one benefit that actually came for him when he did the transformations. His hair remained the ever-present vibrant blonde, but his now had reddish tints on the ends, and it even gave him a bit of a height boost. Nothing too much, just taller than they were. If anything, made his appeal even greater along with his outfit, and so it in turn left him with even more fan girls running about. Much to his ire, of course. As they entered the famed Ichiraku stand, they were greeted by a smile and a happy Tuki. Well, hello there, my favorite customers. Come on in, take a seat, Ayame will be right with you. At that moment Ayame came out with smile. Hey everyone, whose tab, and what shall it be? Kurenai raised her hand. It'll be my tab this time around, and I'll take a miso. Pork. Hinata stated. Veggie. Ino said with a smile. Pork and miso. Ayame nay. Naruto said with a grin. Coming right up. Ayame wrote down the orders, and went to work behind the counter. After a few minutes Kurenai spoke up. Alright team, tomorrow will be a somewhat of a training day. We also won't be taking any missions tomorrow. Ino's brow furrowed. Why's that? We always at least do 3 because of Naruto's shadow clones. That is true, but tomorrow is our team's evaluation. Kurenai explained. During this month all Genin teams are being evaluated to see if they are eligible for C-rank missions. How the test is conducted is different for every team. Naruto raised an eyebrow. So unlike the second Genin exam, it may not be solely focused around teamwork. Kurenai nodded. Correct. So after this I want you all to get some rest tonight, you'll need it. All three nodded, and Hinata spoke up. What would happen if we failed? Nothing bad, I assure you. Nothing as extreme as being sent back to the academy, though if they see anything that should arouse suspicion they'll look into it. Kurenai stated, though I doubt that would happen in our case. The worst thing for us will be only doing more D-rank missions, till the next examination. Though that'll be the Chunin exams this year, and the rate that you three are progressing I may enter you all. Their eyes widened in surprise. They didn't think they were all that strong to be recommended to enter the exams. Though in truth for their Genin generation they were actually on top in terms of skill and knowledge. Naruto being a natural leader, ninjutsu specialist, and minor taijutsu specialist. Hinata being support, taijutsu specialist, and med nin. Then there was Ino, who was long-ranged, genjutsu specialist, and minor taijutsu specialist. Though this was their known skill set. If they were in actual combat, the only semi-predictable one would be Hinata. So after that statement, their meals arrived and they indulged in their fine cuisine. After the ramen was gone and other conversations were finished, they all parted their separate ways. Aside from Naruto and Ino, that is. They always walked home together unless Naruto stayed behind to practice a bit more. As they walked down the pathway, they saw a familiar sight of Team 7. With that being an ever-brooding Sasuke, a love-struck fangirl Sakura, and an irritated Kiba. Being followed by their lazy sensei reading his beloved book of smut. Now one would believe that Ino would have took off after Sasuke. Well, you obviously don't know her at all. Hey Kiba, how's Akamaru? Ino called out to her friend. Kiba looked up to see who was addressing him and he smiled and waved. Hey there Ino, Naruto. He jogged to greet them with Team 7 trailing behind. Akamaru yipped from atop Kiba's head in greeting and signifying he was okay. What are you guys up to? Just heading home after a day of training and getting a bite to eat. Tomorrow's our team examination, Naruto explained, and their sensei rose an eyebrow. Ah, it seems they're going reverse order this time. Their sensei looked up from his book, and stated out loud. Sakura looked up at their sensei. What do you mean, and what do they mean by team examinations, Kakashi sensei? Kakashi looked at Sakura. Team examinations are for genin cells to see if they're ready for C-rank mission assignments. Now as for my earlier statement, they are doing the examination starting with the higher teams instead from Team 1. Sakura nodded satisfied, and then Team 7 took their leave wishing them luck. Naruto looked over at Ino and saw her gazing after Sakura. You know Ino, if you want to make up with her I'm not stopping you. Ino shook her head and turned to face Naruto. I'm not ready for that, to be honest. What she said that day still hurts. Naruto nodded. Well, it's up to you. I'll support you in whatever you choose. Ino smiled and started walking ahead. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Yamanaka household, evening. Ino was lying down on her bed looking up at the ceiling. Her light had long since turned off, and her old glow-in-the-dark star stickers were the only things that were giving any type of light in the room besides the moonlight. She knew that she should be sleeping and resting for tomorrow, and yet her mind would not stop thinking. Of all the things she could be thinking about, it happened to be about her love life. She thought back to her crush on Sasuke, and the moment where it all disappeared. It was quite the rude awakening to her, and it didn't even happen to her. Flashback. It was right after she had found out that Naruto was working on Kyuubi transformations, and she had just left to do some shopping. She happened to spot her friend Kiba, and his two teammates Sakura and Sasuke. They were coming back from their training, and Ino was going to check up on Kiba and Sasuke when she saw their mood. This is completely ridiculous, Sasuke scoffed. Stuck with you two, and forced to do chores. This isn't helping me become a better ninja at all. Kiba groaned, and Akamaru growled, we get it, you're upset. Boo-hoo, cry me a river. I'm not happy, Abo. Kiba cried out and started rubbing his head where Sakura had just punched him. The hell was that for? Kiba baka. Don't talk down to Sasuke-kun like that. Sakura yelled at them with ever-present screech. Sasuke rolled his eyes. You're just as annoying as he is. You and your blonde friend both annoy the hell out of me. You're both pathetic excuses for ninja. With that, Sasuke sulked off, muttering to himself, leaving a saddened Sakura and a shocked Kiba. Meanwhile, Ino was standing stock still, tears gathering in her eyes. Sasuke doesn't even. He doesn't. I'm not. Her thoughts remained incoherent and jumbled, not even making sense to herself as she continued to stand where she was. Out of sight, and out of mind. Back to where Kiba and Sakura were. Kiba had just gotten over his shock and looked over Sakura, who was still had a sad look in her eye. Now Kiba didn't necessarily like her, but no one deserved to be told off like that, even if you were from an elite clan. At first he didn't know what to do, so instead he grabbed Akamaru and set him on Sakura's shoulder, brining out her out of her shell-shock sadness. Kiba looked away from her. He'll let you pet him if it'll make you feel better. Sakura gave a small smile, and whispered, thank you. Flashback end. That day tore her apart, and that fact it was from one of her crushes. He was utterly ruthless when it came to other people's feelings. If it wasn't beneficial to him at all, then it wasn't worth the time of day. When she went back home that day, she had unintentionally walked into Naruto's home to find him meditating on his back porch. Without so much of a word, she sat down and rested her back up against him. If he was surprised she was there, then he didn't show it. Throughout the rest of the day she told him what happened, and he let her cry out on his shoulder, never once scolding her. He had stayed with her till she was better and ensured her that everything would be fine. That stood till this day after that whole ordeal. It was proven again once more today, since he didn't stop her from trying to patch things up, but she also decided to not tell him that he had placed his hand on her back. When that happened, she had to push down the blush that had threatened to come to fruition. Thinking back to it, that little act had made her extremely happy inside. She wasn't going to deny herself any further that she had a full-on crush for Naruto, and who could blame her, besides the Sasuke fan brigade. She let out a sigh, and rolled onto her side, and whispered into her pillow, what am I doing? I had no problems acting on my emotions for Sasuke, so why now? As she mulled over this more, she realized that maybe this time around it was actually true love, and not some silly crush. She's already spent near almost 7 years with Naruto as a neighbor and friend. Friend. That's what it was. She was his friend, and she didn't want to lose someone this close to her. She looked over at her clock, and it read 11:30. She then gazed out her window. She got up and walked over to it, and as she looked out she saw there was a light on in Naruto's kitchen. Ino frowned. He should be in bed. And so without a second thought she opened her window, jumped out, and walked over to Naruto's house. Meanwhile Naruto was hard at work on a current Fuinjutsu project. Before him were thicker parchment cards. There were 6 total, and each were different. In the very center of the matrix were different elemental symbols, or the symbol of chakra. One for fire, one for water, one for earth, and so on and so forth. He decided to test these cards first before he dabbled into the more intricate ones, such as the yin and yang chakra natures. What he was hoping to do with this little project was to convert chakra to these nature affinities. The goal is to able to use these cards to enhance a current jutsu such as wind to fire or vice versa, give his wind affinity something to strengthen. The other purpose is actually an element prison. Though this required a seal card in the middle to consume any chakra going outside the trap. So far the entire project had been a bust until tonight when he found out how to link the cards together. As he was musing there was a knock on his door. He looked up at the clock confused. Who would come knocking on doors this late at night? He got up and walked over to the door, opening it tentatively, and he got a shock. Ino-chan. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in bed? Ino rose an eyebrow, and put her hand on her hip. I could ask you the same thing, Naruto-kun. What are you doing up so late? Naruto grinned sheepishly. Breakthrough on a Fuinjutsu project. Ino rolled her eyes. Should have known. Naruto chuckled, and then took in her appearance. She was wearing a white t-shirt, and tight black shorts. It was definitely her night clothes, and occasional lazy day wear. Though from what he could see the shirt was starting to get a tad small. Bad thoughts. Kurama chuckled in his mind. There's nothing wrong with admiring you, mate, brat. How many times do I have to tell you? She is not my mate. Naruto growled. Kurama merely chuckled again. That may be the case now, but soon you'll want nothing more than. Blah 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 blah. I can't hear you. Naruto shouted within in his mind while fiercely fighting down a blush that wanted to overcome his face. Ino looked at Naruto confused, seeing his face and eyes going through different emotions. You okay there, Naruto-kun? Huh. Naruto refocused, and saw Ino looking at him. Yeah, I'm fine. He coughed and gestured inside. You wanna come in? I was about to heat up some milk. Ino nodded, and let herself in. That's actually sounds good. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Anytime, Ino-chan. Naruto grinned and closed the door. As they entered, Ino noticed the cards, the ink pens, wells, and Naruto's personal fuinjutsu notes. Still to this day she hardly understood what all went into fuinjutsu, but she did learn how to make storage scrolls, and some minor explosive notes. That's all she could really understand to make. As Ino sat down and examined the cards before her, she asked, "So what exactly did you have a breakthrough in?" Naruto, facing the stove, smiled, "My elemental configuration." Ino jerked her head to him in shock, "You finally completed it. You started this your 4th year, right?" Nodding, Naruto grinned, "That's right, surprised you remembered it." "How could I not?" Ino chuckled, "You wouldn't stop telling everyone about it." Naruto chuckled sheepishly, "Yeah. Can you blame me though? It was my first idea to actually attempt to create." Ino giggled, "I suppose not." She returned her attention back to the cards on the table, "Have you tested it yet?" At that moment Naruto set a mug of hot milk in front of her, and shook his head, "No, I literally just made the breakthrough. I won't be able to test it till after tomorrow's examination." Ino nodded and began drinking out of her mug, with Naruto following suit. They sat in comfortable silence. For the two it had been quite some time since they enjoyed a moment like this with each other. Both missed each other's company even though they were neighbors. Most of the time they were exhausted or had their own personal agendas to meet up and talk with one another. So it was moments like this they cherished to the fullest extent. As Ino sat in her chair thinking about what she was thinking about earlier, she gazed over at Naruto, who was staring at his fuinjutsu cards. "I wonder if he has anyone that he likes. He never really talked about it." Ino mused to herself, and the flashback came to mind, and so she decided to ask what was on her mind. "Hey Naruto-kun." Naruto looked up at her. "Yes, Ino-chan." Ino smiled, "Do you have anyone you like?" Naruto choked on his milk, trying his best not to spill it on his project. All the while Kurama was roaring with laughter, "This is too perfect." "Bahahaha, well go on kid, why don't you tell her how you feel? Now's the chance." Naruto growled internally, "Are you crazy?" She just got over a realization that Sasuke, her longtime crush, couldn't stand her. "I don't want to give her any more stress to deal about." Kurama shook his head, "Then why would she ask you this then? Maybe she wants to know if she has competition, he. The ideas are endless with you humans." Naruto mentally shook his head in exasperation, "Of all the biju to get stuck with, I had to end up with the perverted one." Kurama scoffed, "If you want perverted, try the Nibi. She's just as cunning as a fox, but ferocious as a cat, but I'll be damned if she isn't a pervert." Naruto mentally shook his head, and then refocused his attention on Ino. "I can't say anyone comes to mind. I mean, I like you, Kurenai-sensei, Hinata, and the rest of my class, with a few exceptions of course." Ino blinked before looking down at her mug with a small smile and muttered, "Of course you see it that way." Naruto tilted his head in confusion, "Sorry, I didn't hear you, Ino-chan." Shaking her head, "It was nothing." She stood up, placed her mug in the sink and began walking out. "Thanks for the milk, Naruto-kun. I'll see you tomorrow." And with that she walked out of Naruto's house. Naruto continued to sit where he was before murmuring, "Or was that exactly what you wanted to hear, Ino-chan? Did you really want to know?" Naruto looked through his kitchen window and watched as Ino climbed back into her room and closed the window. "How I truly feel. Team 8 Training Grounds. As the sun rose for yet another day in the Konoha, the genin of Team 8 made its way to their usual training area for their examinations. The only one that was slightly exhausted was Naruto, having stayed up an extra hour working on his project. The three entered the training ground surprised not to see their sensei anywhere in the vicinity. Naruto did a quick look around, and held a half-ram sign in front of him. "No need for that, Naruto, but good job taking the initiative." Kurenai stepped out of the forest line. Naruto brought down his hand and grinned, "Can never be too sure, Kurenai-sensei." Kurenai smiled, "Indeed." She approached her genin and held out a scroll. "This is our mission, also our examination. Naruto grabbed and unrolled it with Ino and Hinata looking over his shoulders. Your mission is to escort and protect me for the assigned route. I will not be able to help you during this time. Naruto nodded as he continued reading the scroll, and then Ino spoke up. Is it ninja that were protecting you from, or is it bandits? Mainly bandits, but some may have ninja training. Kurenai stated. Also, should I fall into enemy hands, the mission is failed immediately. Naruto narrowed his eyes, but nonetheless nodded in understanding. One shot is all we have. Well, I'll broaden our chances then. Naruto grinned, and placed a hand on Kurenai's arm. There was a small disturbance in the air, but after that there wasn't any change in scenery. Well, Kurenai-sensei will follow me, then we shall be on our way. Kurenai nodded, and then the rest of Team 8 fell into formation escorting their client to the appropriated zone. Meanwhile, a single shinobi lay hiding in the tree line, a Chunin to be exact. His name was Mizuki, and he was grinning like a madman. This is too perfect. I'll get my revenge on the demon, and no one will be the wiser. Then all I have to do is take the scroll while the fool of a Hokage frets over his dead body. Mizuki chuckled evilly before watching the team making their way down the path. Though I am surprised they would be stupid enough to walk down the actual path. Oh well, it makes it easier for me. Mizuki jumped from tree to tree as quietly as he could, all the while a clone of Naruto dispelled. Opposite side of the training grounds. Naruto blinked and frowned. Odd. What's wrong, Naruto-kun? Ino looked over at Naruto as they walked down the pathway. Our examiner is Mizuki, but that alone isn't anything special, but he just seemed off. Naruto stated. Makes me glad I did what I did. Hinata nodded. It was quite the plan. When did you have those clones made? Naruto grinned. Early this morning, just in case. Besides, if you know the area where conflict is to arise, always scout it out. Kurenai rose an eyebrow. I knew he was intelligent, but all this planning beforehand is almost like Inara. As her team continued on, she retraced what she knew of what exactly what happened. When Naruto touched her arm, they had performed a perfect kawarimi. Not once, but twice. He had made 3 groups of Henjid clones as the whole group that started at 4 different locations of the training field. Not only that, but both Hinata and Ino had done it in perfect sync with him. Kurenai smiled to herself. Her team was bonding really well to be able to do such teamwork. That was other thing that was built up over time. Naruto had slowly became their strategist. When Kurenai allowed it, that is. If Ino or Hinata had any objections or input, he would listen, and change accordingly. He would make an excellent team leader, and more than likely upcoming Chunin. As they continued walking forward, Naruto stopped and grabbed his throat with obvious discomfort. Ino frowned in worry. Naruto-kun. That was another deliberate kill shot. He understood that the test was made to simulate life and death situations, but these were on another whole level. A bandit or even a ninja with very little training shouldn't be able to throw a kunai or shuriken of that size that accurately. It would seem that he would have to do something incredibly stupid. I'm fine, but it just seems that our instructor is performing far above our mission level. Naruto made a set of clones and sent them out just in case. Naruto looked over at Hinata. Could you do me a favor and look around at our surroundings? Hinata nodded, and activated her Byakugan. Mizuki is approaching at a decent rate of speed from east side. She stated accurately and deactivated her eyes. Naruto nodded. Very well, then he'll be approaching my next clue, and Naruto frowned. Again, he attacked me first. He pulled out his mission scroll. The instructions state to protect you, so by all means he should be going after Kurenai-sensei. He closed the scroll and gazed out into the woods. Those attacks are also far above Genin standards. I think he is really trying to kill me. Kurenai's gaze narrowed. Are you absolutely sure about that? Naruto nodded. But I want to be absolutely sure he isn't doing this because he knows they're clones. So I'll ask you to please remain our client. Kurenai gave a slight purse of her lips, but nodded. Thank you, Kurenai-sensei. With that, the group continued forward. All the while, Mizuki was absolutely fuming that he had been duped not once, but 3 times now by mere Genin, and especially him. As he continued making his rounds, he came across the said group he was supposed to test. Mizuki watched as they walked on, but now he knew he had the right group. They were tense, they were watching their surrounding warily. He knew that the clones shared memories, but he just knew these were the real ones. Mizuki jumped a few trees ahead, waiting patiently as the group closed in further. As they approached, he pulled a large shuriken off his back. He jumped from his tree and launched his shuriken. As it flew down, a single chain shot out from the forest and wrapped around the shuriken. Its rotation immediately stopped and it swung uselessly into the forest line. Mizuki's eyes widened in surprise as two other chains shot out from the forest line in an attempt to snag him out of the air, but he quickly substituted with a nearby log. So I was right. They are the originals. Mizuki grinned. Well, now I finally get to have some fun. Mizuki proceeded to pull another large shuriken from off his back. He aimed and launched out his last shuriken. Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. The shuriken immediately multiplied into 12 identical, and equally real, shuriken raining down upon Team 8. Both Ino and Hinata grabbed Kurenai, and jumped backwards while Naruto jumped forwards to avoid the onslaught. Perfect. Finally, I will get my justified revenge. Mizuki internally grinned and jumped out of his hiding spot, delivering a solid kick on Naruto, sending him flying into the forest, and quickly jumping after him. Ino tried to follow, but Hinata held arm back. Hinata, what are you doing? Let me go. Hinata shook her head. Remember what he told us. Flashback. If Mizuki separates us, continue on with the mission, alright. He turned and faced his teammates. He may just be doing a divide and conquer scenario despite over excessive attacks. So that should mean we stick together then. Not split apart like he wants us to. Ino argued back and Hinata nodded in agreement. Naruto let out a sigh. I'm more than strong enough to handle Mizuki, and besides I don't want to hurt you all when I perform some of my techniques if I have to bring them out. Then Naruto grinned mischievously. In any case, I still owe him a little bit for attempting to screw my taijutsu. Flashback end. Ino looked ready to argue, but she knew Hinata had a point. Fine. She looked out into the forest. You better know what you're doing, Naruto-kun. Deep within training ground 8. I really hope I know what I'm doing. Naruto grumbled internally as he held his sore ribs. Damn, that actually hurt. Not pulling any punches, are you, Mizuki-sensei? As he said that, Mizuki jumped in front of him with a smirk on his face. Forgive me, but that's a little payback for graduation day. Naruto grinned sheepishly. Yeah, sorry, but in all fairness, it could have been you or Iruka-sensei. I decided by a coin flip. Mizuki shook his head, then his smirk darkened. Now that you're alone and your friends are out of the way. Mizuki quickly pulled two kunai and chucked them, quickly pinning Naruto by his clothes against the tree. I can go on what I truly want to do. Naruto's eyes widened. What do you mean, Mizuki-sensei? Why, I mean killing you, of course. Mizuki stated without sympathy. It was something that I wanted to do before you graduated, but alas, I have to make do with what I have. Why? Naruto paled in fear. Because of the demon you are. Mizuki growled out, and Naruto's eyes widened. Haven't you ever wondered why you were always hated? Ignored, beaten, and pushed away. Naruto's head hung, hiding his eyes while Mizuki grinned. It's because inside you, no, because you are the Kyuubi no Kitsune. It was never killed, it was sealed into you the day you were born. Mizuki chuckled as he pulled out 3 kunai. So I'll do all of Konoha one last favor and rid you from this world. He stepped forward. Any last words, Kyuubi? Naruto chuckled and looked up at Mizuki with a smirk, startling the man. Where have you been? I found this out years ago. Though that was a nice speech, if I was some clueless idiot. Mizuki was shocked, but still snarled. So what if you know? It doesn't change the fact that you're going die. At that moment he hurled the kunai. One landed between his head, the second in his heart, and the last in the center of his stomach. For a moment there was a deathly silence, then Naruto simply popped in smoke. What? As if on cue, 3 chains flew out of the brush, and wrapped around Mizuki. Naruto stepped out, his palm having a swirling vortex. Well, that definitely explains your unnecessary kill shots. Mizuki was enraged beyond belief he was fooled by him again, but he quickly smirked. You think this will hold me? You forget I am a Chunin. Mizuki tried to switch places, but found that he couldn't call upon his chakra. I'm sure you noticed by now, but I'll enlighten you. Naruto held out a slip in his hand, chakra suspension tags. Nifty little things, aren't they? He then held up another seal tag, and this little one has our entire little conversation. In the distance a flare went off in the distance signaling that the group had finished and met with the finishing Chunin. Oh, would you look at that? The exam's over. Let's go meet with them, shall we? Naruto grinned evilly, while Mizuki paled. Center of Training Ground 8. Where is he? We already lit the flare. Ino tapped her foot restlessly. Iruka stood eyeing the path in which he believed they would come from. I'm sure they're fine, Ino. He turned his gaze to Kurenai. Are you sure Naruto wasn't exaggerating? Kurenai didn't respond for a moment. Naruto has been many things, but he has always been sure of what he says. He's more mature than most his age because of the very thing he contains. Kurenai stated and looked at Iruka, so I'm inclined to believe my own student. Kurenai was suddenly silent, jerking her head back to where she was looking before. Iruka frowned. Kurenai. Shish. Kurenai hushed him as she solely focused on the direction she believed Naruto was. Sure enough, there was a sound building up in noise as she began to see a shape form in the distance. As that. Kurenai's eyes widened. Move. In the next instant all four ninja in the clearing jumped away as the said form collided in the center of the clearing. As dust hung in the air, a young Naruto wasn't far behind as he jumped into the clearing. As he walked in, he was dusting off his hands, admiring his handiwork as the others joined him. Naruto! Iruka yelled as he jumped back in. What was that? Naruto looked over at Iruka and grinned. It's not so much a what, but more of a who. He turned his attention back to the clearing as the dust settled. Isn't that right, Mizuki-sensei? Iruka's eyes widened. Mizuki. He looked at the center and sure there was Mizuki attempting to sit up while still wrapped in chains. Naruto, release him, the exam is over. Naruto scoffed. As if he tried to kill me. Iruka glared at Naruto. That was the point, Naruto. This was to test if you could handle the stress of a potentially death-like situation. I understand that, sensei. Naruto stated, glaring at Mizuki, but he blatantly told me he was going to. I have the proof. For a very stupid reason, for that matter. Mizuki, who finally managed to sit, chuckled maniacally. Oh, stupid is it? The fact that you're the Kyuubi no Kitsune is a stupid reason. Iruka's eyes widened, and prayed that Naruto wouldn't do anything stupid. Mizuki. That was forbidden. Mizuki growled. He already knew, but I wonder if your team knew. He sneered at Naruto. It was silent for a moment before Ino stepped closer to Naruto. Well, yeah, we knew, after all he did tell us. Hinata nodded in agreement. He told us shortly after we were a team.